This is the Garis Masculist MGTOW flyers, that is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 353, part 2, entitled a Biconscious Masculist Harangues a Monoconscious Feminist. Carrying straight on. Masculism is forcing women to grow up, to fip up, by bothering to get a career-competent education so that these women can become responsible fips as adults, not expecting to be parasites off men's money when they have kids. The hypocrisy of fluffy feminists is hated by masculists, which is why we aim to wipe you out by removing your fluffy feminist hypocritical bitch genes from the gene pool, by punishing you by totally ignoring you with our fuck only fips policy, so that fluffy feminists cannot get the sperm from quality men for their kids. As masculists, we know that we men have the power to force women to fip up, because a fluffy can only be a fluffy if she can manage to get her financial claws into some gullible manslave. But thanks to the internet, the masculists and MGTOWs are spreading the masculist/MGTOW message to men, not to be manslaves to the hated fluffies, and to express their male contempt towards the even more hated fluffy feminists, who are even worse, because it's bad enough that they are fluffy parasites, but worse, they are hypocrites, because they are both fluffies who expect equal rights for women, but reject equal obligations for women, that is, by sharing equally with men the burden of earning the living by bothering to fip up. It's men who liberated women, in brackets, from household drudgery, by giving women the contraceptive pill, household gadgets, higher education, modern medicine, life expectancies into the 80s, so that women, even those who have 2 kids, have a career window of some half a century. So the masculists are telling women in strong moral terms, quote, now that women can work, they must work. Anything else is parasitism of the labour of men and is hence contemptible. End quote. Masculists see manslavery as slavery. Slavery rouses passions. Slavery is a war issue. Look at the root cause of the US Civil War. The masculists are at war against the fluffies and the fluffy feminists, aiming to wipe them out. In the limit, if the gender laws are not made men fair, then responsible males, masculist soldiers, will go out into the street in a sex war, assassinating the gender politicians who made the divorce laws so toxic for men that men reject marriage in such large numbers, who reject the passage of the para-paternity rejection right, which is the most blatant form of sexual discrimination that exists, that is not against women but against men. Masculist soldiers in a sex war will murder thousands of feminazi divorce court lawyers and judges, and go into the streets and simply shoot feminazis. Masculist soldiers will not tolerate that the feminazis indirectly wipe out whole populations, which is what they are currently doing. In South Korea now, the birth rate is under 1 child per woman, whereas the replacement rate is 2.1 children per woman. Young Korean and Japanese men find traditional marriage so toxic that they have gone MGTOW in huge numbers. Most women have a deeply held attitude and expectation of men that, quote, men exist on this earth to pay for women to have babies, end quote. Masculism rejects that attitude and is out to kill it off by rejecting marriage and paternity until the gender laws are made men fair. For example, in the divorce courts, bringing in the para, and men fairing the gender laws across the board. There are many laws that discriminate against men that need to be reformed. As a masculist, I can see that's the feminist, I can see your claim that masculists are selfish in forcing women to raise kids on their own. But until you women vote with men to men fair the gender laws, we masculists and MGTOWs will continue to hold a knife to the throats of both women and society until we get the men fairing of the gender laws that we demand. Then, and only then, will men be prepared to be fathers again, willing to help pay for the raising of kids together with women. But we are still decades away from this happening. Society still needs to be radically transformed, first into what the Masculists call the creation of a FIP society. That is, where both sexes are raised and educated by parents and teachers to be FIPs, that is, financially independent persons, to be raised to become responsible adults who take responsibility for their own lives and don't expect fluffy style to be able to parasite off the labour and money of a man. There's a long way to go in the FIPPing of women. In today's high schools, 3/4 of young women at age 16 choose to study fluffy crap majors that will make them fluffy crappers as adults, with career incompetent diplomas that the economy does not value. So these women will not be able to afford on their own the middle class houses they want to raise their kids in. So in their 30s they will go hunting down some gullible manslave to parasite upon so she can raise her kids in a house all paid for by him. The aim of the Masculists is to wipe out fluffies and fluffy feminist hypocrites so that all women become FIPs. And if they don't, they are punished by not getting a man, hence forced to be manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and as Masculinist ideas spread throughout the culture, spat at for being fluffy vermin, to be wiped out. So, you see, you fluffy feminists, you monoconscious feminists, there are two sides to the gender political story. From now on, you feminists will have to share the gender political stage with the Masculists. And since we Masculists are male, we will quickly dominate that stage due to our genetic superiority. As I mentioned before, men are 4 IQ points smarter on average than women, because women had been sexually selecting men who were smarter, taller, bigger, stronger, fiercer than women for 1,000,000 years. A stronger, bigger, taller, fiercer man was more able to defend his woman against other men. Smarter men made better hunters, so were more sexploitable by women. The patriarchy, that is, general male dominance, is a side effect of women's hypergamy, that is, the female instinct to mate up. That is, women's desire to mate with superior males, to get the superior male's superior DNA for her kids, so that her kids could have superior DNA compared to hers. And that's obviously good for the species, so was inherited. Thus, the patriarchy is a side effect of women's hypergamy. Yet feminists blame men for the patriarchy, whereas in reality it was caused largely by women's sexual selection of the types of men they wanted to mate with over 1,000,000 years. The inability of feminists to see that the patriarchy is a side effect of women's sexual selection reflects poorly on the feminists, that is, on their irrationality and scientific ignorance, and is viewed with contempt by masculist scientists. We masculist scientists are you monoconscious feminists' most formidable enemy. We are smarter than you, and being male are a lot more aggressive. The more you feminazis come out with your is-silent PC feminazi bullshit, the more vociferous we masculist scientists will attack you and harangue you out of the room. We see you feminazis as repulsive to men and force you to be manless. We masculists teach young women not to be like you. We masculists use you monoconscious feminists as anti-models to young women, telling them that if they become like you, they will pay a heavy price. Men will punish them the way we masculists punish monoconscious feminists like you. Young quality men, the smartest ones, are the first to go masculist and MGTOW. They are the first to pick up on the lessons of the masculist and MGTOW theorists and ideological leaders. They are the type of men, that is, the quality men, that young women really want to mate with, desiring their superior DNA due to women's hypergamous nature. Young women nowadays are increasingly panicking as they become conscious that young men are increasingly refusing to give these young women their sperm, so that these young women are learning to hate the feminazis as much as men do. Because the Masculists and MGTOWs are teaching these young women that the primary reason why quality young men refuse to give them their sperm is because of the toxicity of the divorce courts, taken over by the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites. So the monoconscious feminists are now being hated increasingly by both sexes, as young women join forces with the Masculists and MGTOWs in becoming motivated to vote together with men for the men-fairing of the gender laws. For example, reform of the divorce courts, the legislation of the para, etc. We Masculists also tell young women that it's in their self-interest to become Biconscious Feminists, that is, to learn enough Masculist/MGTOW ideas that they can see that gender oppression is a two-way street, and that in fact women oppress men far worse with their fluffy financial parasitism of men that lasts decades, that is manslavery, that ruins a man's life compared to being free to do what a man wants, going his own way, creating his own life with his own goals, not being a manslave to a fluffy parasite, not working for a woman, sacrificing his life for a woman. Biconscious women are much less feminazi bitchy, because they have had their feminist anger at men for the way men oppress women more or less cancelled by an equal and oppositely directed masculinist anger at women for the way women oppress men. Biconscious women are much less feminazi bitchy and hence much more approachable by men, so such women are much more likely to have boyfriends, to be regularly penised and given tenderness and affection, than the monoconscious, misandrist, male-dumping, feminazi bitch like yourself. Women like you are repulsive to men, which is why you are punished by men by being totally ignored. If you want men to like you, you will have to use some common sense and make yourself likable by men. And to do that, I suggest you bother to do some homework by looking up the terms MGTOW and Masculist on the internet and studying the ideas of the Masculists and MGTOWs. Once you become biconscious, you will lose your feminazi bitchiness, and then you'll understand better why so many men reject marriage and paternity, in brackets, 2/3 of the young men in many Western countries now. F, brackets, stunned into deep silence, feeling utterly crushed by such a massive and undeniably persuasive harangue from her masculist opponent, in brackets. She quietly slinks away with the wind totally blown out of her sails. M, calling out to her as she walks away, quotes, "Imagine how it's going to feel in a couple of years when nearly all the quality men you come across have been infected with the masculist virus, who will not tolerate your feminazi dogma and who will bite your fucking head off with masculist rhetoric, with masculist terms, and with male intellectual venom. You women can't compete with men at the top end of the performance scale. Now that men have entered the arena of gender politics, we will quickly take it over with our superior intelligence and our superior verbal aggression, given our greatly superior testosterone levels, making men more aggressive, more ambitious, more driven, more dogged, more persistent. We men have only tolerated you women until now due to your two traditional monopolies of vagina and womb. But within a decade or so, you will lose both those monopolies, as men prefer to sex their bots with their luscious curves, film star faces, creamy, grippy vaginas, and grow their own kids in art wombs. That's artificial wombs. 40% of women are obese and 70% are fat or obese, hence sexually repulsive. Traditionally, men have only tolerated women because men have wanted to penis women. But with the sex bots doing a better job of it, women will fall into deep depression and suffer a major inferiority complex as men ignore women in their billions. Women will then be forced to be much nicer to men and will be forced into a desperate competition with other women for men's dwindling attention. Feminazis will die out because they will be the first category of women to be punished and ignored by men. Masculists want women to be nurturative fips, that is, competitive with men in the workplace but nurturative at home. Men don't want to have to compete in both the workplace and at home. Wives who compete with their husbands at home are far less attractive to men than wives who are nurturative to their husbands. Men can't have tender feelings towards competitive wives. Instead, men are much more likely to divorce them because such women are not attractive to men. Those women who aren't nurturative fips will see their genes removed from the gene pool as men take power over reproduction and sex, in brackets, which were women's two traditional monopolies, close bracket, with their male-engineered sex bots and art wombs. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. And the book containing some 250 plus flyers on masculinist themes of MGTOW and masculism, entitled Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women. An e-textbook of 250 plus masculinist flyers, and on masculinist, I'm forgetting, I should have written this up, but it's an e-textbook for men's studies courses. I'll stop here. So from now on, so that I can get my videos on Minds, which has a time limit of 20 minutes, which is a pain, I will now routinely split my videos into 2 parts. Ciao.